we felt that the best way to keep information current and get information to you in the quickest way possible was to create a COVID-19 webpage. And so that is where all of our information will go from here on out. You'll get emails as well, but we want you to know that you can check back here if there's any updates. They'll be done directly to the webpage. So this is the COVID-19 landing page. I'm going to kind of go over it a little bit at first, and then we'll dive into the, like Sherry said, dive into the election information and virtual meetings. On the landing page, it shows, it'll keep you up to date on when the staff goes back into the office.
Did Suzi freeze? Okay, so while Suzi's unfreezing, I'll go over this general part, and by the time we get to the governance part, she.
Oh, am I frozen?
Oh, you're back on?
Am I back on?
Sounds like it.
Oh,
you were
sorry.
just talking about when the office closed.
Oh, sorry. So this will show you when the office closes, and then we'll also see, you'll see here the programming. As you can see, the reflection ceremony has already been rescheduled, so you'll be able to find that as well. So check back here for more and more, as things change every day, check back here for our programming changes. And then the rest of the page is about the overview on conducting PTA business. The website is set up the same as our other websites, where the blue text is links. And you'll see that as we go through the conducting PTA business as well. So as you can see here, the ceremony webpage is blue. It's a link, just like in the rest of our website. So we'll start kind of going through conducting PTA business. The biggest change you'll see, the first change you'll see, I guess not the biggest, but the first is that all of our guidelines have been extended through June 30th, 2020. We realize that, you know, it doesn't look like we're going to be out of shelter-in-place orders by April 30th, so we've extended that to June 30th. On this landing page is the overview of all of the changed guidelines. There are 3 sections here that you've already seen. We sent them out in an email, which would be executive board and committee meetings, the emergency email voting for executive board and committees, and then also you've seen the emergency electronic voting for a meeting as well for membership meetings. What you haven't seen is this section here, marked new, which is the section about elections and votes that are requiring discussion. So before I dive into the actual election language, I just want to start with a couple of things. In our bylaws for our locals and our councils, we don't have what's called successor language. Our term ends when the fiscal year ends. We don't have language that says, or when your successor is chosen. Our term just ends at the end of the fiscal year. So that's the reason that we needed to spend some time and come up with some really good guidelines around what a virtual election would look like, because all of our PTAs are most likely going to need to conduct a virtual election this year. So remember that. And then also, I know as we go through this, y'all are going to think of 1,000 what if scenarios. I know we've talked through a bunch of them over the hours that we've been putting all of this together, so I totally get that. But what I want you to think about is the goal is to follow the procedures that would most closely resemble the fairness that you would expect in an in-person meeting. So that's what we took into account as we went through all of the guidelines that we're going to give you, is to resemble the in-person meeting and protect the member rights and continue to keep that fairness in play. So just keep that in mind as we go through. And then, okay, so here's the broad overview. Elections may only be conducted in a virtual meeting. We're not going to do any email elections. The PTA community must be notified 10 days before the meeting, and we're going to talk about meeting notice here in a bit. Your attendees must register to attend in order for us to verify that they're actually members of your PTA. And then for councils, that would be a little different because you'll already know who your delegates are, so you can reach out directly to your delegates. We do have a caveat in here for someone who wants to run from the floor but is not a member of your PTA. Remember that our bylaws only require them to become members when they take office, so they can run for election without being a member. We need that registration process, which we're going to talk about, to have an option for them to register as a guest so that we can differentiate them from members when we vote on PTA business. Of course, you have to have quorum. always have to have quorum to do business. And then the thresholds for voting on items is going to remain the same. So if it required a majority vote in person, it requires a majority vote online. And then of course, minutes will be taken exactly as they would in an in-person meeting. The only difference is that we're requiring that all virtual meetings meeting minutes be approved by a minute review committee, just to make sure that they're quickly reviewed by people who were actually in attendance at the meeting. So that's the general overview. We're going to get dig in here in just a little bit deeper in just a minute. We also have some guidance down here about scheduled membership events, and really just letting you know that if you were having an event that is you can no longer have because of a law or an executive order, you are not required to get that cancellation or postponement approved by your members. You can't have it based on the law. So go ahead and do that cancellation or postponement, but make sure you let your members know. Okay, so the exciting stuff, right? Let's click into our virtual meeting and election guidelines. The way the website is set up is that what we've given you is the overview that we just went over. We're giving you the checklists. We're giving you a script and some frequently asked questions. We also have a page that is going to dive into creating your registration and your balloting and some options for hosting the meeting. We feel that between all of those, we hopefully will get all of your questions answered, or at least give you a good base knowledge to move forward on.
Suzi,
So
can you zoom in just a little bit? Sorry.
can I do what?
Zoom in a bit.
If I can figure out how. Let's see if I can figure out how to zoom in. Oh, you know what? I think I just used my fingers. Oh, that's funny. Sorry.
Thank you.
Oh, good gracious, Susie. Is that good?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. The technology's, way smarter than I am. So what we have here is remembering that everything in blue is a hyperlink that will take you to another page. I'm not going to take you to this particular page yet because I want to talk about the one that we're on first. We have the link to the meeting script here. It's in 2 formats. We're going to go over that in a minute as well, and then we'll dive into the virtual meeting questions in just a minute. What we've done here is break up the tasks that will need to take place for your election meeting into the role in which should probably most likely take on that task. I understand that in this time, maybe these people won't be the ones, but that will be for that PTA to decide for themselves, and they can do that as well. What I want to remind you before we kind of start is that the goal is most of this meeting is going to be run in the same way you would run an in-person meeting. The differences are how we verify membership ahead of time and how we vote. So let's start looking at it. As an executive board, we're going to need the executive boards to make some decisions ahead of even sending out the notice. So your first step is going to be for your executive board to meet. They're going to need to decide how many, I'm going to move my little screen here because I can't see everything. There we go. They're going to decide how many days prior to the meeting people will be able to join the PTA in order to vote on PTA business. As you know, in an in-person meeting, people can show up at the meeting and join the PTA and vote. We've changed that for virtual meetings, and that deadline must be at least 5 days prior to the meeting because we need time for that PTA to verify that membership and get the ballots ready and the emails ready to be able to send that out. So people can join your PTA up to 5 days before the meeting in order to participate in the meeting. How will the candidates run from the floor? Your executive board will need to choose. There's 3 options. The first option is that the PTA will only accept notice of intent to run from the floor at least 5 days prior to the meeting. Now remember, in our overview, the notice of the meeting had to be sent out 5 days prior. So they've gotten notice and they have 5 days to let you know if they want to run from the floor. Or you can choose to only allow candidates to run from the floor in the meeting. So no previous notice. It would just be everybody running from the floor at the meeting. Or you can choose to do both. If you're thinking, okay, well, what's easiest? Well, probably easiest is choosing the first option, where they have to let you know in advance so that you have time to put the ballots together ahead of your meeting. But any of them are doable, and we're going to show you how to do the balloting here in a little bit. So that's a decision that your PTA needs to make, your executive board needs to make. And then they also need to make sure they know how the minutes from the last meeting will be approved, if they need to be read at the meeting or if they were approved by a special committee, just so that you have all your ducks in a row when you start your meeting. So those are the things that you're, they also need to provide any input just into the agenda, just like they would in a non-person meeting at an executive board meeting ahead of a meeting. And then you guys the executive board members will need to find out who can complete these tasks. You're going to need to set up a registration system for your attendees. You're going to have to create the electronic ballot. And then we're going to need a teller, one person, to serve as the teller should there be a contested election. The teller's job would include having the ballots ready to email out. If you take nominations from the floor, they'll need to add that name in really quickly, and emailing those ballots to the members, opening and shutting the form down, monitoring the voting time, and then reporting the results. And we'll look at all of that in a minute. So these are the things that the executive board needs to decide as a group. Okay, and we're going to get into these hyperlinks in a minute, so don't freak out. So the president is going to chair the meeting just like they would as normal, using the script that we've provided, and then make sure that all of those responsibilities are covered. What we do want to make sure that the president has done is gotten enough help to take care of all of the stuff in the background, chats, all of that stuff, so that the president can focus on chairing the meeting and know that all of those things are being taken care of in the background. So your secretary ends up with the heaviest workload ahead of the meeting because of the change in needing to verify membership. So before the meeting, the secretary 10 days out is going to notify the members through your regular electronic channels, and they're going to use the meeting notice guidelines. We hope this makes it easy for you to do the notice, because we've pretty much laid it out for you. This is what needs to go in your notice. You need to include the agenda. It's not a special meeting, so you can add additional items should you need to at the meeting. And then if this is going to be the meeting that includes their election, they need to make sure that they've shared what that choice was as to how candidates can run in advance, from the floor, or both, right? So they need to include that as well. And then they need to include a reminder that only members can participate in the business, reminding them that they can join through joinpta.org, or if you have something else like ChatterUp or whatever, up until 5 days before the meeting. And then once that notice has gone out, they're going to, they're going to also include the meeting rules, which I'll jump over to that in a minute. An explanation of what platform y'all are going to be using and what the voting process is going to look like. So however you've chosen to do your voting, you're going to include that process here. Once they've registered and that you've gotten to that 5 days, the secretary will need to send out a second email to all of the folks that she has confirmed or are members and approved guests. And that communication is going to include how to join the meeting. So that's when you'll send the link and a password if you're going to all of the folks that are going to actually join your meeting. If you're going to send minutes, financials, anything like that ahead of the meeting, those would only go to your members, not your approved guests. So that's why it's really important that you keep those folks separate, and we're going to show you how to do that on the registration. I'm going to go back up here to meeting rules real quick. We've actually got those written here for you. All you have to do is copy and paste those bad boys over into the meeting notice. Okay. We thought it would be best that they get them in advance so they're not trying to read them or remember them or figure them out during the actual meeting. I see why you wanted it to be bigger. All of these rules came straight out of the Parliamentarian's Guide. So I'm going to go back to the virtual meeting guidelines, back to our checklist. Make it big for you. Okay, so we've gone through the meeting notice guidelines. The secretary is also going to have to have a complete and current membership list, especially including the ones who join after the meeting notice. So she needs to get that list at 5 days out from the meeting. She'll need to verify, and I say she, could be a he, they will need to verify membership of the registered attendees. So whoever's registered, they'll need to compare against that membership list and determine that they are members. Then they'll send them the information on how to join, and then send them members any necessary meeting documents. Before the meeting, once everybody has been allowed, is in the waiting room and about to join, they'll need to verify or have joined already, depending on which platform you use. We'll need to verify that the folks in the meeting are members or approved guests, and which are which. Also helping to achieve quorum. During the meeting, the secretary will just take minutes as normal and present the minutes from the last meeting for approval, however they determined up in their executive board meeting. Your treasurer will need to present the financial report just like normal, any budget amendments just like normal. And if it's time for you to present your 2021 budget, do that as well. We are recommending that your PTAs consider doing that in a separate meeting, just because we're not sure how long the election meeting is going to take them, should it be contested. So just consider that. If you get all of that information ahead about who's going to run from the floor, you may be able to do both at one time, but you don't want this to take forever, right? So just keep that in mind. We will need, again, whoever was decided to be the teller will need to take care of all of the teller duties during the meeting, sending the ballots to the membership, which will have a list of their emails, as you'll see in the registration, and then opening and closing the vote and communicating the results of the vote. Your membership chair will need to make sure that they have a complete list 5 days before and get that to the secretary. Your parliamentarian will need to be familiar with the virtual meeting script and the rules to help the president, and their job will be to time any candidate speeches for 2 minutes apiece, should that be a need. If you had a nominating committee that was elected and finished its work, the nominating committee chair will need to attend the meeting and read the slate and make sure that that slate was posted at least 7 days in advance of the meeting. We've gotten a lot of questions about posting the slate, and we've just encouraged people to go ahead and post the slate should they already have it. There was really no reason not to go ahead and post it. So a lot of those have already been posted. If they haven't, get them posted. So that was the duties that we determined would be needed for the meeting itself. I'm going to jump over to, let's see, I think I'll go to the script first. Now remember, I told you this script was in 2 formats. I'm going to make it bigger too, because it is really small. If I can figure out. My fingers aren't working on that one. Let's see if I can make it bigger. Hang on, it's still loading. Oh, here we go. What's too big? Okay. This document can be translated into Spanish, and we've got instructions for them to translate it right there. All of our web pages that we were just looking at can also be changed into Spanish as well. So they should have access to, so our Spanish speakers should have access to all of these documents. Remember to make a copy of this if you're going to change anything. We've got this locked down, so you can just view it right now, but you can copy it and then make any changes you want. It's in 2 formats. It's in this script type format, which is similar to the script that is in the president's guide right now, the build a script that we have. And then if we go further down, you'll find a table format that some of you may find easier to use, just whatever your preference is. I'm going to go back to the script, so don't worry. I just want to show you the table format. All of the gray is the next agenda item. Obviously, the black is who's speaking, the red is what they're speaking, and then any notes that we added would be over here in blue. All of the words on the table and the script above are exactly the same. They're just put in different places. So don't worry about it being any different, because it's not. And remember what I told you earlier, that most of this meeting is going to run as if it was an in-person meeting. You're going to start your meeting, appoint your secretary or parliamentarian if they're not there. You're going to do your introduction and welcome. The difference here is that you're going to have to explain your technology and go over the rules. So you want to make sure they understand how to raise their hand, unmute, chat, any features you plan to use. If you're using Zoom and you only have the 40 minutes, you need to make sure you have a plan for that you share. Also let them know that during the registration process, you verified their email so that they can conduct a ballot vote, and that they'll be receiving their ballot via email. Secretary reads the minutes just like they would in person. The president will appoint the minute review committee for this meeting that we're having, this virtual meeting. Treasurer will get up there and do the financial report just like normal. The officer and standing committees will give their reports just like normal. If they have anything they needed to be voted on, it'll be done just like normal with a voice vote. Hopefully you can tell what the voice vote was. If not, we've got some options for that as well. So it goes through all the words for that. Most of the words for all of this, all of the items that are being done the same as in person is the same words that were over in the build a script. So none of this is new. So this should be really easy, right? We tried to use as much of the same content as we could to make it as easy as possible on our leaders. So then we go here, budget amendments would fall under the chair reports under treasurer. Same language as you would use in a in-person meeting. And then we come down to our special committees and special orders. If they're doing any bylaws amendments, this is the same language as in person. And then we get down to our election of officers, and this is where some of the language changes. The president's going to explain which option that PTA chose. And then there are language options based on which option they chose, 1, 2, or 3. And so we have it broken down. We also have it broken out if you had a nominating committee and didn't, what you should say and how that should run. And most of it is exactly the same. The big difference is going to be is if you have a contested election, while the nominees are giving their candidate speeches here, you're going to have people in the background, your teller, who is going to either be adding that last name to the ballot or adding the names to the ballot, and shooting that ballot out to your email list. Once everybody has received, once you've sent the email, they'll have 2 minutes to cast their vote using that ballot. We put language in here to just kind of pause the business, because if you continue to talk or give announcements, it makes it hard for your attendees to go check their email, cast their ballot, and come back and not miss anything you've said. So we're going to take a 2-minute pause, go cast your ballots, come back, and then as soon as the 2 minutes is up, you'll close the form, report the results, and move on. Okay. And then the rest of the, this is if you didn't have a nominating committee, same language, just like before, same process. You'll have unfinished business, any new business, which would include a budget if you want to approve a budget, your announcements, and you'll adjourn. So really, like I said, right, most of it is the same. There's just a few tweaks we have to make it virtual. Let's go back and look at the virtual meeting tools. So we have a whole page here on virtual meetings, the registration, the balloting, and the voting. For the registration, we want to make sure that you create a registration form in advance. Let's see. So create the registration form in advance. You need to make sure that you have both, and so we tell you in here exactly what to include. Their full name, phone number, email address that they will have access to during the meeting, because that's the email we're going to use for ballots. And then also you want to have an option in there to let you know if they intend to run from the floor, if you're asking for notice in advance. And then remind them that each member needs to register separately with their own email address, because ballots will only be sent to the email address that we have, that they've used through the registration process. So if you have a husband, a wife, and a student that are all going to be voting, they all need to have 3 separate email addresses in order to vote on separate ballots. Okay. Now all have to register separately. For balloting, it's we've kind of covered a lot of this already, but would like you to make every effort to, we're not requiring what you use for a ballot, but what we are asking is that you make sure that it's an anonymous vote. We have created a template for you. And as you can see, this is the live version of this. I've tried to make it as clear as possible. Don't edit this one. Please click and make a copy of this, because we wanted to have one ready for your PTAs so that they didn't have to go through and learn how to make a Google form if they didn't want to, if they wanted to use something else for the registration process. If they use this one, they'll simply put president and who the candidates are, make it required. I've already set up the settings to not allow a second submission. And I've also opened it up so they'll be able to see the result of the vote, so that they can't claim any kind of, wonky, willy-nilly stuff. So this ballot is ready to go. You just need to make a copy of it and customize it to your PTA. You will have to have a new ballot for every single position, because you have to finish one position before moving on to the next one, because the person that lost president may want to run for first vice president, so they'll need that opportunity. We will suggest that you make a copy of each ballot in case there's a tie. That way you're not having to frantically recreate a ballot. You have a backup one just in case you need to, and you need to reballot. So you'll want to have 2 ballots of every ballot that you need ready to go just in case. Okay. And hopefully you were able to see that ballot. Were they able to see that ballot? Somebody shake your head, yes. Oh, good. Okay, thank you. It's like talking into the void sometimes. You're just like, I hope they can hear me. Okay, so hopefully that helps with the ballots. We've listed out here platforms that you can use for your virtual meeting. Zoom, Google Hangouts, GoToMeeting. We've given you some recommendations to keep Zoom secure, as I know you've all heard about the Zoom bombing. Here are some recommendations for registration and balloting, Google Forms or SurveyMonkey. We have created a document, well, I guess I should say, we didn't create a document. California PTA created a document that everyone is using, which we are so appreciative of. They have walked us through how to create a Google form that can be used in this setting. So those settings I was talking about before, where not allowing them to make a second vote, allowing them to see the results, how to do all of that is in this Google form. And we customize this to work for Texas PTA. So it's a little different than California's, but they set this up. And so this is super easy process to walk through for your PTAs. So we're hoping that they'll use this for their registration form. Let's go back. We also have got a comparison of some of these companies in case you want to look in and find which one will work for you. If you do end up having to do, if you can't tell a voice vote, depending on what software you're using, if it doesn't have a thumbs up or a thumbs down or something along those lines, you may have to use one of these other tools. So it's not often that our locals or councils have trouble with voice votes, but you never know. And then our last page that we hope will cover all of the rest, I think I missed it down here, will be, let me go back to our virtual meeting links. And at the bottom, here's our frequently asked questions. So every question we thought of that kept coming up between our work group and the folks we showed this to, we tried to include here. You'll find the first part is about the virtual meeting. How do I do it? Does the current board roll over? No. mandatory, yes, for elections. Is it okay to post? All of this stuff, how to translate your meeting, quorum is necessary, all kinds of stuff. Most of the stuff we've already talked about, but we put it here in the frequently asked questions to find it quickly. Then, and on that ballot, we'll send it to the emails, but any response is collecting no identifying information. We're not collecting the email address that posted it. We're not collecting names, any of that. So it's an anonymous ballot once we get it, once they fill out the form and send it back. Then we have another section down here for y'all. And this is some of the frequently asked questions that Heidi's been getting and that we've been getting about financial transactions, reconciliations, and tax questions. I will tell you that some of this you've already seen, some of it you haven't perhaps. The financial reconciliation, I'm going to go ahead and address that now. We will have more information about how to do that virtually coming up. We had to get this part done before we could focus on how to do a financial reconciliation virtually, but that will be coming. That is a broad overview of the process and the tools that we have given you.